Mark stepped out onto his driveway, coffee in hand, only to freeze at the sight before him. A bright yellow ticket slapped onto the windshield of his own car. Unauthorized vehicle. Subject to fine and removal. His car. On his property. At first, he thought it was a mistake. But then he saw Tom Wilkins, the self-proclaimed HOA enforcer, standing across the street, arms crossed, his smug grin practically screaming, "What are you going to do about it?" That's when Mark knew. This wasn't about rules. This was about power. For days, the bogus tickets kept coming. Fines. Threats. Tom and his wannabe HOA cops circling like vultures, convinced they could bully him into submission. But what they didn't know? Mark wasn't just some guy they could push around. He had a plan, one that would leave Tom humiliated, the HOA scrambling for cover, and the entire neighborhood watching as the real cops got involved. And by the time it was over, Tom would regret ever touching Mark's car. But let's start from the beginning. Mark Reynolds had always been a quiet, law-abiding homeowner in his suburban neighborhood. He paid his HOA dues, kept his lawn neatly trimmed, and generally minded his own business. But that all changed one Saturday morning when he walked outside with a cup of steaming coffee and noticed a bright yellow ticket stuck to the windshield of his Dodge Charger. His brow furrowed. The ticket read, "Unauthorized vehicle, subject to fine and removal." Mark blinked in disbelief. Unauthorized? On his own driveway? He glanced around and immediately spotted Tom Wilkins, the self-appointed HOA enforcer, standing across the street with his clipboard and that smug look on his face. Tom was a middle-aged man in his late 50s, with a receding hairline and an obsession with HOA rules. He wore his signature cheap HOA polo, tucked into ill-fitting khaki shorts, and his reflective sunglasses sat too high on his nose, giving him a ridiculous, almost cartoonish appearance. Mark exhaled sharply and walked over. "Tom, what the hell is this?" he asked, holding up the ticket. Tom grinned, tapping his clipboard. "That, Mark, is a violation notice. Your car is an eyesore. It doesn't match community aesthetics." Mark stared at him. "An eyesore? Tom, this is a 2021 Dodge Charger. It's spotless, and it's parked in my own driveway." Tom shrugged, unimpressed. "HOA regulations, Mark. You should have read the handbook." Mark felt his jaw tighten. This wasn't about a rule. This was about control. And he wasn't about to let Tom win. By Monday morning, Mark had collected 4 more tickets on his windshield. Each one threatened, daily fines, possible towing. Further action. If the violation continued, it didn't stop there. The HOA patrols, aka Tom and a couple of overzealous retirees in matching polos, started circling his house like vultures. They'd take notes, snap pictures, whisper to each other, and sometimes just stand there, arms crossed, glaring at his car like it was a national security threat. Then came the letter. Official HOA stationery. Your continued refusal to comply with neighborhood vehicle regulations will result in increased fines, legal action, and possible HOA-sanctioned vehicle removal. Mark let out a bitter laugh. Legal action? For parking in his own damn driveway? That's when he decided to play dirty. The next time Tom and his minions marched up Mark's driveway to slap yet another phony violation on his car, Mark was ready. He pulled out his phone and started recording. "Tom, tell me exactly what rule I'm breaking." Tom paused mid-pen stroke, shifting uncomfortably. The HOA board reserves the right to enforce community standards. "Wrong," Mark cut him off. "I read the HOA bylaws. There's nothing about driveways. You're making this up." Tom's smirk wavered, but he doubled down. "Look, Mark, you're bringing unnecessary trouble on yourself. Just move the car, and we can forget this ever happened." "Or," Mark said, pulling out his phone and dialing 911, I can call the actual police and report you for harassment and fraud." Tom's face went pale. His two HOA lackeys took a step back, suddenly not so eager to be involved. Mark turned his phone screen toward them. "Oh, look, it's dialing. Hope you guys have a good reason for what you're doing." By the time Officer Daniels, a tall, no-nonsense cop in his 50s with graying hair and sharp eyes, arrived, Tom was visibly sweating. Daniels glanced at the stack of bogus tickets Mark had collected. "Let me get this straight," the officer said. "These guys are trying to fine you for parking in your own driveway?" Mark nodded. Daniels turned to Tom. "Sir, do you have any actual legal authority to issue fines?" Tom cleared his throat, adjusted his glasses. "Well, the HOA has the right to enforce neighborhood standards." Daniels cut him off. "So no legal authority. That means issuing false citations could be considered harassment or fraud, and I don't think you want to go down that road, do you?" Tom looked like he wanted to disappear into the ground. Daniels sighed, folded his arms. "Sir, do you want to file an official harassment complaint?" Mark turned to Tom. "Well, Tom, should I?" Tom mumbled something, face beet red, and stumbled away with his clipboard. The officer shook his head and chuckled. "These HOA types think they run the world. Let us know if they come back." Mark grinned. "Oh, don't worry. I will." Turns out, Tom and his HOA goons had been scamming the entire neighborhood. By the end of the week, the city stepped in. After an investigation, it was revealed that HOA had been fabricating violations for years. They had illegally fined over 30 residents. They even towed cars without cause. The fines? Refunded. The HOA board dissolved. Tom? Fired from his little HOA enforcer role. And the best part? Mark drove his Charger right up to the HOA office, parked it front and center, and taped a copy of the cease and desist order on his windshield. Then he leaned back in his car, sipping his coffee, while Tom packed up his desk inside. Tom glanced out the window, locked eyes with Mark. Mark waved. And just like that, HOA's phony little empire came crashing down.